Howdy everybody, this is Steven again with a brand new topic today. Last time I talked about the Kenner DC Superpowers line. This time I will continue talking about another line that was done by Kenner a couple of years after the Superpowers. And that line would be based on Superman, and it was called Superman Man of Steel. It saw a release of several figures, some good guys, some bad guys, many variants of Superman, and some 2-packs as well. And this line was released around mid-1990s, roughly around the time of the Superman animated series. It was trying to follow the formula of achieving the same kind of success like the Batman animated series already achieved by that time, and with its toy line as well. And I think this line was rather good. Unfortunately, he did not manage to include some other characters which would have been nice to see. For example, he did not see the release of Cyborg Superman. He was completely excluded. For those of you who don't know who Cyborg Superman is, he's one of the Superman imposters who appeared roughly after the time when Superman got killed in the fight with Doomsday, back in the 1990s comic book issues. So Cyborg Superman was just claiming to be the actual Superman, and he seemed that way except for the part that half of his body was a cyborg and the other half was Kryptonian. So there was a bit of confusion there. In the end, it proved that Cyborg Superman is just an imposter. He's not the real Superman. But anyway, more about such discussions another time. I do have Cyborg Superman in other toy lines, but not in this particular one. But I will show you what I do have here. Again, as I said, this line was made by Kenner, the same company that made Superpowers, and they made numerous Batman toys as well, specifically the ones based on the Batman animated series. So the first one in this discussion would be Superman. And this is the way he appeared with long hair after he returned from the dead, meaning after he was resurrected due to a Kryptonian chamber or something that actually revived him and brought him back to life. His costume remained the same except his hairstyle changed dramatically. He was supposed to come with the plastic chains that you wrap around his wrists, and supposedly the way for him to get rid of them is to just press the legs. Again, they kept that feature from Superpowers again with the legs. To press the legs, and then he will just fling his arms up and throw away the chains. In other words, mimicking the feature that he can break away from any chains. So he had, again, even much more limited articulation than Superpowers, because he had literally no major articulation, not even in the knees this time around. He could only move the legs forward about that much. So they took it one step backward when it comes to articulation, and this much backward. The cape is made of rubber this time and not the cloth anymore. The cloth was bypassed altogether. It's made of soft rubber, and it has the letter S at the back, at least that much. These days, usually Superman does not have any such thing on his cape for whatever reason. And the arms are spring-loaded, so they can just be placed down, or when you activate the feature, they can be thrown up. But anyway, this is Superman from the mid-1990s by Kenner, and I'll show you the one from Superpowers from the 80s by Kenner, so you can see there is quite a bit of a difference between them, height-wise and articulation-wise, but the costume remains the same, and the fact that the older Superman has the cloth cape while the new one has rubber. So anyway, that's Superman version. And now, of course, before he donned his old costume again, this is how he looked at first. He was wearing his Kryptonian regeneration suit that actually pretty much helped him to recover his powers and all that sort of thing. But you would have to read some of the issues of Death of Superman and then The Return of Superman, which is still available in paperback, I believe, in order to get the complete idea how this story went, where he died and then came back. You can see again, while he's in his regeneration mode, he has long hair, just like later in the first figure, and he's wearing predominantly black costume with some silver accents and no cape. Again, articulation very limited, nothing in the knees or elbows or anything like that, just the basic articulation. He came with, I believe, some attachments and things of that sort. In the comics he was carrying a big laser gun because his powers did not come back yet. But I don't have those particular ones, I only have the figure. I don't have those accessories. And to show you how they look side by side, the same character just in two different costumes. So that's as far as Superman goes. He did show up in a rather interesting variant in the same line. Again, pre-posed, you can only move him a little bit around, as most of these seem to be done the same way. This is Street Fighter Superman. He's pretty much dressed up in a trench coat, which is very neat, but you can still see his Superman insignia underneath. He's carrying a Superman logo shield, and he's carrying a chain. Pretty much he's dressed up like a sort of a guy who would go take part in street fights. So I'm not sure when did he ever wear a costume like this, maybe in one of those what if stories, but I still like the way he came out. He's pretty neat looking like this. And he has a silver letter S on the back of his trench coat. He has a feature that when you move his legs, yeah, I know, I'm becoming repetitive, it's always about the legs. But anyway, when you move the legs, he will smash down with his right arm holding the chain. That is the action feature. And of course, to complement him, they also released Superboy, who is not Superman when he's younger. This Superboy is different. This one was created in a lab using some of Superman's DNA. So this Superboy here is completely different from the actual Superman being Superboy. And he was pretty much reimagined this way, that he's wearing a leather jacket and he looks like a teenager. But I like to pose them together due to the fact that both of them are wearing trench coats and leather jackets and that sort of thing, so I think they go along well. Now Superboy here came with some kind of like heavy duty jackhammers or something of that sort to attach to his arms, which I found it very silly, because in the comics he does not use any such thing. And he's also missing, which he never got as a toy, he's missing his sunglasses shades. But this is pretty much how he looked like in the comics as well. You can also still see the letter S. There is no cape, but he can fly. And he has a letter S at the back of him. So this is how they would look side by side. They were sold separately, not as a two-pack. So they look pretty neat. I really like these two figures from the entire lineup. They are really good. Anyway, moving on. Some of the other variations of Superman would be some of these fellas. That's all Superman, of course. This is like sun-powered Superman or something like that. He was a deluxe figure. He's missing his attachments, but he does have a short hair here. And he has a silver letter S and a completely different style of the costume. And of course here he's also a deluxe version. You can tell that he has translucent goggles, and a feature like the vintage Darkseid that you can look through here and sort of mimic his rays that come out of his eyes and that sort of thing. He came with some kind of a weapon, but unfortunately this figure, when I found it, did not come with those weapons, so it's missing a knapsack with a weapon that goes into his right arm. But he's made of chrome plastic, so that looks pretty neat. Kenner used to use chrome for some of their figures in Batman and Superman lines, so that's rather neat. I like that. So that's the two particular variations of Superman that came out in the line. And then we have another version of Superman from a comic book story where he's again facing Doomsday, but that storyline is called Hunter Prey. He was packaged together with the Doomsday, and I believe I have that Doomsday right here, so I'll show you. And this would be Doomsday. He's made to look bulkier and a bit bigger, as you can, well, sort of bigger. Actually, I would say wider, not bigger, but wider than Superman. and they would also come with an issue of the actual comic book Hunter Prey packaged with them. As far as I know, neither of them really had any accessories. Superman comes with a rubber removable cape. All the versions of Superman that had cape in this line was always removable, and he has letter S at the back. And then the basic articulation, and his actually this one has something new. He has the waist articulation, so he's able to move a bit to the right and the left, which most of the other Superman figures from this line do not have. Now, the interesting thing about him is that this costume is obviously based on that comic book storyline, but it's quite an interesting one due to the fact that I think it looks just quite good on him. And then the Doomsday here, the creature who actually killed Superman initially, also has limited articulation, and he also has at least the movement in the waist, and the arms and hands are already pre-posed. In other words, you cannot do much with them, you cannot bend in the elbow, but it's interesting that he has all this neat detail with these stalagmites or whatever you want to call them, and spikes coming out of his body, just like in the comic book. And yes, the heads cannot really move much, but at least he's posed in a fighting stance. Now there was also two versions of Steel, which is another pretender to replace Superman, but he is a good guy, and he had numerous appearances in the comics, and especially in some of the Superman episodes. His real name is John Henry Irons. He's a construction worker whose life was saved one time by Superman, and he decided to repay Superman when Superman was dead by taking his place and donning a costume that was very similar to Superman's, and try and fight the criminals as much as he can. And he also helped bring Superman back, and he was quite pleased to see him when he realized that Superman is alive again. And his major power would be to use these sledgehammers, like the construction sledgehammers, to fight the enemies. Now this is this shiny version is the one that was a deluxe version. Unfortunately, he's missing his cape, and he's missing a hammer and well, a sort of a hot poker hammer that goes through this attachment here, which is not removable, and you can sort of launch those hammers at the enemy, because this little gadget is spring-loaded. But even though I don't have those particular accessories, I still have this particular Steel is actually complete. This one is just missing accessories, but both of them are in good condition. John Henry Irons also has a daughter, Natasha Irons, and she became a female Steel in some of the future comic books. Now, her character was released in one of the DC Direct lineups, which I will talk about when I get to her. But anyway, that is Steel, a very formidable ally to Superman. Now we have here Eradicator, who was another pretender to replace Superman. And if you read the comic book, you'll find out more about him, what was he all about. But he did save the life of Superman while he was regenerating, and all the power that he had, like Superman's, was transferred onto Superman, so he sacrificed himself to save Superman, and Superman managed to absorb his powers. It was Cyborg Superman who kills Eradicator by trying to kill Superman, but instead Eradicator sacrifices himself in turn to save Superman. And this is another version of Superboy. He was released to look more like a surfer, and he was packaged with a King Shark figure, another enemy from the DC Comics and also enemy of Superboy. And he came with this sort of Superman-based surfing board, very interesting design. So he would stand on it and do the surfing and fight the King Shark. So this is how he would look on it. Now the last two I'm going to cover, as far as this storyline goes, is Lex Luthor, which looks pretty boring in my opinion, because he didn't come in his armored suit, he comes as a civilian. And I kind of decided to make him a bit more dangerous, so I molded this little shiny stone to resemble kryptonite. I know kryptonite is green, but I was just improvising. He came with a sort of a bee shaped attachment that would squirt water, which would supposedly be like a kryptonite laser. So those attachments are missing, so he's just being displayed like this at this time. I still wish they put him in his battle armor. As we all know, Lex Luthor is the most formidable enemy, or at least one of Superman's most formidable enemies. He has articulation, like most of the figures, except this particular one does have no articulation in the waist, and he is in a way pre-posed. Now the last character would be Conduit. Now I don't know much about him other than the fact that he's a bad guy, and he's using his long conduits to disable Superman from being able to fight back. I believe the conduits have strong electrical powers or laser powers, something anyway that can actually harm Superman or even put him out of commission for a while. He does come with a removable helmet, and this is how he looks underneath. If any of you guys really know more about this character, do let me know, because I'm really not familiar with him. But anyway, he's neatly done, and I like the fact that he has interesting colors all over him. An interesting mix of colors. Anyway, that's all the characters I have when it comes to Superman Man of Steel toy line by Kenner from the mid-1990s. And that's pretty much all I have to say about that at this time, unless I get some more figures from this line. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'll catch you all next time. Bye.